Welcome to Aarhus School of Architecture. Welcome back to our Life Terrains lecture series. A lecture series, as some of you know, in which we now for precisely 1 year have collectively tried to investigate how natural and social landscapes are transforming, how they ought to be re-theorized or rethought in a time of global ecological mutations, with the help of leading thinkers, activists, artists, and practitioners. Now, after keynote talks by historian Frédéric Aitouati, painter George Rouy, philosopher Emmanuel Kocha, musician Conor Deegan from Fontaines, DC, we ended last fall's run of talks with a presentation by architect Martin Rauch, who gave a lecture on the potentials of the often forgotten art, the often forgotten technique of constructing houses made of clay and rammed earth, a mode of building with earth rather than against it. In a sense, one couldn't, at least I couldn't, have hoped for a better voice to continue onwards from there than that of French sociologist Geneviève Pruvost, who today will enlighten us on some of the historical, sociological dimensions of both living with and building with earth in another manner. In her eco-feminist work, Pruvost has convincingly, continuously shown how the productivist regime of industrial modernity euphemizes, how it hides subsistence, labor, and how alternative, and it's an important scare quote, subsistence-based everyday practices both point towards more sustainable, more just, and maybe even more liberating or free modes of organizing material life. For this reason, a couple of years back, I remember when Bruno Latour and I discovered Pruvost's work, we immediately, intriguingly, enthusiastically saw it as nothing but essential for the understanding of the emergence of what we called a new ecological class, precisely because Pruvost's work showed people assembling around practices, connecting the broken link between the world we live in and the world we live of, hereby underlining how alternative modes of collective life already do or does exist. Now, much more could be said, should be said, will be said, but I am not the best to do so, especially since we today here have another guest with us who is much more qualified for introducing Genevieve's work than I am. Anne-Sophie Dickmann, in my opinion, one of the most interesting ecological thinkers of Denmark, is a political theorist, a postdoctoral researcher at EHESS-CEMS in Paris, working at the intersection of feminist theory, again, ecological thinking and ethnographic research, coming from the tradition of new materialism and hydrofeminism. Anne-Sophie has in recent years turned her gaze towards the eco-feminist tradition, not least through a fruitful discussion with Pruvost's work, and with Pruvost personally even, with whom she has now authored the soon-to-be published book Husholdningspolitik. And we are therefore extremely lucky to have her as well with us today to introduce Pruvost's talk titled Ecofeminism, Subsistence and Eco-Housing. However, knowing that Anne-Sophie's introduction will be more theoretical than biographical, so to speak, allow me just a few details on today's keynote speaker. Pruvost, research director at CNRS and affiliated at EHESS-CEMS Paris, is a sociologist, as indicated, specialized in work, gender, ecofeminism, ecological lifestyles, working, among other things, on ecological alternative modes of life in rural areas. She holds herself a degree in permaculture, which is very impressive, eco-construction and environmental struggles. Among her books, we find notably Quotidien politique, Féminisme, Écologie et Subsistance from 2021, La Subsistance au Quotidien from 24, and for her work she has not only been awarded the CNRS Bronze Medal in 2009, she was furthermore recipient or laureate of Prix de l'écrit social in 25. and for good and well-deserved reasons, with, I dare to say, Pruvost being one of the most interesting eco-feminist scholars of our time. A scholar whose, at first sight, subtle empirical analysis always brings us to the edge of imagining how the world could be inhabited differently. Indeed, it is in that manner one might say that Pruvost is a predictive social theorist in Ulrich Beck's sense of the term. That is a scholar who allows, or let's say her analysis allows us to borrow from the present, even if it might be indebted to the future. And for this reason, we are here at the school extremely proud and happy to welcome Pruvost in the Live Terrain series, in which we precisely try to investigate not only what it means, but also what it could mean to inhabit territories anew. A collective, continuous investigation, which will return on May 8th, when the Live Terrain series welcome German sociologist Hartmut Rosa here at the school. But first things first, with these words, again, welcome to Aarhus School of Architecture. Welcome back to the Live Terrains lecture series. Please help me give a warm welcome to first Anne-Sophie Dickmann, then Geneviève Pruvost, and finally Carolina Dyer from our own school, who will moderate a conversation with Pruvost after her talk. Thank you for your patience.
How is Nikolai? I think there is something with the sound, right? So, yes. How is the sound? It's good. Okay. Thanks so much, Nikolai, for that very generous introduction. And thanks also for inviting Geneviève and I to contribute to the Live Terrains series, a series where several stellar thinkers have already contributed. It is a true honor to be part of, so thanks so much for that, and also thanks to Aarhus School of Architecture. And of course, I want to thank you in the audience for being here and showing your interest in the subjects of ecofeminism, subsistence, and eco-housing. So, for the next 15 minutes, I will pose and answer 3 main questions as a way of introducing Geneviève's lecture. First, what is ecofeminism and what is subsistence feminism? Secondly, why are these bodies of work relevant for architects, and why are architects relevant for these bodies of work? And thirdly, how does a future subsistence feminism look like? And here I will also draw a bit on my own research. What is ecofeminism? In my own search for a satisfying answer to that question, I went to Paris in 2024 to initiate a collaboration with Geneviève. Earlier, during my doctoral studies at University of Copenhagen, I was trained in what is called new materialist thought, as Nikolai already mentioned. The most important point within this paradigm is, as I see it, the idea of a flat or a rocky ontology where humans and non-humans are both viewed as living agentive bodies. In fact, humans and non-humans are so closely intertwined and entangled that human bodies are essentially more than human bodies. As I worked on and still work on today gender politics, the new materialist scholars I engaged the most with were feminist thinkers such as Donna Haraway and Anat Singh, who I was so fortunate to study with during a longer research stay at University of California, Santa Cruz, back in 2022. However, this eye-opening training in new materialism, a tradition of thought I still hold very dear, left me a bit unsatisfied in my endeavor to combine ecological thinking with radical social justice politics. At that time, I was studying women in the social movement, the Yellow Vest, or Les Gilets jaunes, in France, and their fight for a socially just transition. Doing so, I conducted an immersive ethnographic study with these activists. My wager was that ecofeminism could help me improve my work, extending my new materialist research in new, intriguing social justice directions. And then Nikolai was so kind and extremely generous to make me aware of Geneviève's influential ecofeminist work. So, as a postdoctoral researcher, I returned to France to work on establishing some new nourishing conversations between new materialism and ecofeminism. So now we are almost ready to answer the question. In an introduction to a new version of a book called Ecology/Feminism, Revolution or Mutation, ? Written by the French writer and activist Françoise Daubonne, who coined the term ecofeminism now more than 50 years ago, Geneviève defines ecofeminism. In short, she writes, ecofeminism intersects ecological and feminist thinking by including the perspectives of women, people of color, other minorities, working class people, nature, and non-humans in a common critique of capitalism. Ecofeminism puts an emphasis on gender, class, and decolonial politics on top of climate politics. What is then subsistence feminism? As an attempt to combine these multiple political aspects in her own work, Geneviève turns to the household as an important political unity. Here she punctuates the hierarchies of mental and manual labor, and by doing so she reevaluates the corporeal and hard work that mostly women, people of color, working class people, and non-humans, such as animals and plants, but also even water and stones, undertake to sustain our lives. This analysis is crucial today, for as Geneviève puts it, it is no longer necessary to know about trees to furnish our home or sheep to get dressed. The consequence is then that nobody worries about the subsistence of everyday life. This, I would say, is a quite accurate description of how most modern people live their lives today. The relationship between ecofeminism and subsistence feminism is then that the latter constitute a branch of the first, and whereas some ecofeminist works, not many but some, exist in Danish, subsistence feminist literature is still a quite undiscovered terrain in Denmark. Geneviève fleshes out her subsistence feminist thinking in two recent books. Quotidien politique, or Politics of Everyday Life, from 2021, and La Subsistance au quotidien, Subsistence in Everyday Life, from 2024. Later this year, Geneviève and I will publish a book in Danish entitled Husholdningens politik, or in English, Politics of the Household, which consists of parts of these two French books introduced and situated in a Danish context by me. In the book, I also raise some new perspectives of where to take subsistence feminism next. This I return to shortly. Having said all this, I believe we are now ready to turn to the second question on the relations between subsistence feminism and architecture. Obviously, a very strong link exists between these fields, as subsistence feminists advocate certain types of households where people can be in closer contact to the living matter that sustains our homes, our bodies, our lives. Architects can thus contribute to subsistence feminism by helping us draw and build such homes. But crucially, as Geneviève will demonstrate in just a moment, subsistence feminism also already engages with people who themselves build their eco-homes, their eco-habitats. I will leave it to Geneviève to unfold this aspect of her subsistence feminism. So, in the final around 5 minutes I have left, I will point to some new perspectives in subsistence feminism. Geneviève works with people in rural France who build their own eco-homes. She has conducted an impressive decade-long ethnographic study with these people who live alternative socio-ecological lives. In line with this, subsistence feminism generally focuses on the countryside, where people have access to fields and to lands. Echoing the Indian professor of development economics and environment, Bina Agarwal, Geneviève advocates the right for everyone to get access to a field of one's own. A garden or a field is an integral part of what it means to live in an eco-house. But with the current, even accelerating global tendencies of urbanism, I think we should also work on rebuilding our cities, thus expanding subsistence feminism in new directions. At least 3 tasks remain to be dealt with. First, how can we build cities that are more connected to the countryside where food grows? That is, how can the city-country transition become smoother, inviting city dwellers to go to places of food cultivation? Secondly, how can we restructure cities around urban gardens for city dwellers to experiment more with the practices of subsistence in their everyday life? And thirdly, how to build housing, apartments with shared gardens, clay walls, and other socio-ecological components. Geneviève and I have talked about these initiatives, and this conversation in the form of an interview is also part of the forthcoming book in Danish. In my own research, I have worked most thoroughly on the second task, that is the one of urban gardens. For instance, as part of my former PhD project, I conducted a long-term fieldwork on the outskirts of Paris with people, including the Yellow Vest, who engaged in an urban garden. On the photo, you see the peach orchard we cultivated and cared for. This is another photo from the same place. Here, people experiment with treating food as a common good instead of a monetary product, and of attaching ecologically to the nature that upholds our lives. So we might extend the argument from a field of one's own to also include common urban gardens. Later this spring, I will extend my French study in a Danish context, as I will initiate a fieldwork in an urban garden in Copenhagen. The research question that guides me is this: how can urban gardens foster city dwellers to connect with the material conditions of subsistence and engender a green transition politics, while also strengthening democratic life? Cultivating food, but also more broadly, transforming the materiality that makes us sustain, is a matter of bodily work, contact, touch. To live a subsistence feminist life means to connect with the vibrant matter, such as food that grows or walls that breathe. It means to become with these matters. In a recent article, I developed a novel feminist approach to socio-environmental politics by conceptualizing the notion of sweaty bodies. With this concept, I turn to the openness, to the porosity of our bodies, flesh and skin. In a time of global heating, where we sweat more intensively, and in a time of social inequality, where manual labor, that is, the sweaty modes of work, are neglected. For instance, the notion points to the fact that when human bodies work with and touch the matter that sustain our life, such as plants, human and plant bodies mingle and sweat together in fluid, beneficial, more than human, life-sustaining ways. Thinking with movement, with work, with contact and touches between human sweat and plant sweat is, I argue, a key insight to subsistence feminism, one that takes the tradition of thought in a more theoretical, phenomenological direction. Geneviève works with the breathability, to breathe, and also partly with the sweatiness of ecological construction materials such as clay. As I see it, building walls with clay implies that humans sweat as they work with the clay, and doing so they literally open up their bodies to the material. The human hands stick to the clay, and the moist materiality of the clay sticks to the human hands. Could we even start to think about the walls in our homes as another layer of skin? Curiously, as with human skin, clay sweats too, in the sense that it has the capacity to cool down and thermoregulate our homes and thus our bodies. This is a much needed attribute today. These nascent thoughts are arguably crucial to raise in an introduction to Geneviève's lecture, where she will talk about how eco-homes are built and lived and perhaps even felt. So with this said, I will stop for now and hand over the word to Geneviève. Thanks so much for your attention.
No, I like it this way because I need to see what I'm going to.
Okay.
Yeah. So thank you very much for the invitation, and I will speak more about subsistence and also the history of subsistence than eco-housing. But I hope you'll ask me questions about this. First of all, I'm a sociologist and an ecofeminist theorist, and I don't think abstractly. I always think with fieldwork. So I wanted to show you first that what I did before and while I was thinking about ecofeminism. I worked on two different populations, people living and working differently and who are invisible and discrete. And here are three different fieldwork. How do you skip? How do you change? Oh, you don't go this way? Oh, this is good. Okay. I conducted about 130 interviews and made a number of fieldwork sharing everyday life of a radical ecologist population. And I worked on two different populations. One is living and working differently, very pacifically, being invisible and discreet, you know. Maybe you recognize this kind of, since it's an anonymous survey, I cannot give you some pictures. So I had these little sketches. And I did also a monography. I focused on the countryside of the village of Valonde, which I invented this name, with 995 inhabitants. And I focused on a household, Florian and Miriam. Florian is 38 and Miriam in 37. And they live in a yurt. This is something we'll speak at the end of the talk. And they have a 3-year-old daughter. They have 2 cows, 2 goats, 6 sheep, 12 beehives, about 50 chickens, a solar panel, an old tractor, a sewing machine, 100 of tools, 9 hectares of wasteland and woods, and 4 hectares of meadow that is lent to them. And they live with a group, a community around them that stayed around between 5 and 10 kilometers away. And I happened to only focus on them, but I met about 40 alternative people. I also worked on 2 professional sectors dedicated to ecological practices, midwives and doulas, who advocate for physiological childbirth. And I also worked on earth construction. I'm writing a book right now with 2 masons, so practitioners and me. I also work about the earth construction struggle for better building regulations. But I also worked on being an activist in frontal combats. So I especially made a special survey on what we call a zone to defend in a village called Notre-Dame-des-Landes, struggling against an airport. So what I realized, so here are some pictures of Notre-Dame-des-Landes where I came about a dozen of times. Which is really interesting for me is that in all these different ethnographic fieldworks, I met women healers, organic farmers, eco-builders, midwives, medicinal plant collectors, shepherds, weavers, visual artists, dancers, rural squatters, nomads, bakers, hearth builders, eco-housing architects, energy healing practitioners, and a lot of them were women. These women were living by themselves or in couple, in tiny house or intentional community or eco-hamlet. And for this population that, I visited, reconnecting with the natural environment is experienced as emancipatory and empowering. The idea is very far from one of the most commonly accepted principles of feminism, that is, assigning women to roles related to nature has led to their alienation. I would like to show how this feminist principle, which is so politically important, can be reconsidered, not for saying that women are closer from nature. It's not at all my point. I actually don't believe it's even that nature exists. It's not what I'm going to say. But women have been relegated to the role of touching, handling living matters considered as dirty. So the point is to say that something crucial happened to humanity and the planet when we face the decrease in the number of ordinary people touching with their hands, touching the soil, and when it's associated with dirty, a primitive stain from which we must free oneself to be free, as a poor peasant or a worker or a woman in the north and the south. So since I was meeting so many neo-peasants and neo-craftsmen and women experiencing the touching of living matters as something rich and desirable, I needed to find theoretical texts helping me to understand this new narrative. Since I was working on left and extreme left and anarchist activists, I also had to find texts from the same political wing, which means not reactionary text or extreme left and extreme right. So I searched through text on feminist history, sociology, that gave prominence to home-based agriculture, crafts, and self-production without being reactionary. This is how I happened to discover ecofeminism, and inside this movement, a body of work on subsistence, mainly written in the 70s and the beginning of the 80s. These ecofeminist theories challenge the apparent emancipation offered by wage employment and modern comfort under capitalism. These ecofeminists participated, all of them that you can see, participated to the women's liberation movement. They defended for abortion. They were against violence against women. They were for against men, against violence, but also fought at the same time with ecologists against this other male violence, which is nuclear power plants. They envisioned that nuclear power as military weapons and as a civil energy was something that would destroy the earth. Françoise d'Aubonne, who invented the word ecofeminism in 1974 and supported the first green candidate for the presidential elections in France, said that nuclear power is also a big political problem when you are an anarchist, when you think that small-scale villages and small-scale societies are better than national and urban societies. Because with nuclear plants, it means a forever strong state with an army of engineers to handle the complexity of this technology. Ecofeminists are all anti-nuclear activists, which is in France very important, as you know, since we have so many nuclear plants. Ecofeminists make a significant shift from the rest of the women's liberation movement by focusing on another topic, which is the everyday life, autonomy. They don't campaign for the conquest of politic power at the head of state. They have other concerns, other priorities. Do women control the raw material, the tools, the execution, the time, the symbolic value, and the goal of their work? And they ask a very radical question, which is not usual. They ask this question: did women gain from industrialization? Which is quite, a shocking question when you are, like me, born in industrialized country. This type of questioning belongs to a thought that I have chosen to call subsistence feminism, which is very. I'm not going to define because Anne-Sophie did it, but they say that self-production for basic needs is the precondition of a feminist action, which is also quite very different from the usual feminist thing. So in this, so they have an effort of a rehabilitation by highlighting the central role of women in peasant societies. So I will start, this is something I developed in this book, but I will start first by what the kind of conceptual inversion of perspectives they make. So the first thing they do is they're re-evaluating subsistence. They are not alone doing this. You have a lot of authors also doing it. Here, I think do you see Ivan Illich? I don't know. In French, it's this is is a very famous thinker that during the counterculture in the 70s, Henri Lefebvre or Marshall Salins. So you have a lot of historian, ecological thinkers that who at the same time re-evaluate subsistence perspective and economy. They, because the concept of subsistence, I don't know exactly how is it in Danish, but usually it refers to basic needs: food, shelter, clothing, healthcare. And it also refers to survival. It's as if you were barely alive and you survive in subsistence. But all the anthropologists, on the contrary, of this image, miserable image, tried to show that subsistence actually was a core of every society before industrialization. And it's not an individual subsistence or a small subsistence. This is a whole society, a whole coordination and community that depends on the organization of labor and the political redistribution of subsistence work. So when we speak about subsistence economy, we don't speak about a little thing. We speak about how societies were all organized before industrialization. So first reevaluation, so what is the place for women in subsistence society? Since it's only 50 years that we forgot a little bit in the North about subsistence societies that are prevalent in a lot of places in the South, in global South. The first reevaluation is that women's work in subsistence is crucial to the survival of the group. Actually, the approach of subsistence feminists directly challenges the concept of gender division of labor by proposing another interpretation. Because gender differences for subsistence feminists and also subsistence historians, gender differences are not systematically interpreted in hierarchical, you understand what I mean, hierarchical terms on a material and symbolic level. It's not to deny the patriarchal domination or the violence they suffer, but they try to take in account the fact that we have Western and modern eyes and androcentric, ethnocentric, and we give a lot of space in modern society to public assemblies, heavy machinery, military power. But for pre-modern sedentary societies, heavy labor in the fields in which women participate is really a vital and a crucial activity. In nomadic societies, the work done by women in preserving and preparing food is just as crucial as other tasks. It's actually a political task, because it means you are going to say who is going to eat or not. So who is going to have how much and when? So it's a really political, big political thing. So I would like to add that also subsistence thinkers and ecofeminists are from the very beginning decolonial. They think with global South. They are against development ideologies that forces vernacular ways of life to be modernized. And just to give you an example, Maria Mais and Vandana Shiva place at the center of their reasoning the fact that 80% of women in sub-Saharan Africa produce food, while in India, the agricultural sector is between 70% and 80% female. As it happens, this subsistence polyculture agriculture, which has evolved from 1,000 and years, is very environmentally friendly, integrating a variety of plant and animal biodiversity, but is also able to meet the basic needs of community, provided that the rural exodus have also put an end to this organization. So the first reevaluation is to say that subsistence farming, subsistence building is absolutely the basis of the organization of pre-modern societies. And also a second reevaluation highlights the importance of women's role in terms of capacity for action and decision making. Marxist feminist anthropologist Eleanor Leacock who worked on Native American women, said that gender division of labor often forgets about the fact that women could have a self-organizing sphere for themselves, where they could be separate from men and actually decide for what they wanted. So it's not, it doesn't, so it's also, they said it's about a colonial thing that we needed to create some chef, and so it made invisible the real role that women played because they were very, very active on the subsistence scene. For example, another anthropologist showed that when he made a study of the task predominantly performed by women in more than 800 societies, and he showed that vegetable gardening, seed pulverization, small-scale livestock farming, basket weaving for carrying food and tools, gathering firewood, weaving, medicinal plants, midwifery, childbirth, breastfeeding, and also building could be traditionally assigned to women, which means that actually women could live without men. They don't need their task force. This is a little bit, it's a funny conclusion, but when you read this, this anthropological work at the end, this is what you think. So it means that they play a crucial role in decision making in everyday life. A third reevaluation concerns the sacred and spiritual dimension of subsistence. The scientific rationality that gradually took hold from the 16th century ignored the animated and organic nature of the living world. Nature has been segmented into inert materials to be exploited. This is, I think, maybe you studied it with Nicole, but this is what the ecofeminist Caroline Merchant exposed in her book Days of Nature in 1980. This cosmology is still very vivid for many indigenous peoples who cultivate fields, and it's not about just satisfying a need for security. It's also about connected with what we call Mother Earth, through women, but also through other figures in the role of mediators. So it's another problem when we read, we forget about the importance of religious, spiritual organization, and that puts also male in a position of power. I didn't speak about living and building, but I wanted to show you a lot of different pictures. Okay, you know, I had a lot of trouble finding the same pictures with women in Europe making buildings. I had to go in other cultures, and it doesn't mean they didn't build in the past, but it means that we don't build today, and we don't have enough pictures because pictures didn't exist in the past. So here, if I could find these pictures, it's because it's still vivid. You still have women building and helping building and making their dwellings. And so I will just give you an example of this. The town of Dora in northwestern Nigeria is a mud brick town, raw clay, which is not cooked. And still today, construction projects follow a festive community-based approach with mutual aid. So the client commissioning a house would provide meals during construction and organize a celebration with music and dancing in honor of the builders. And the builders are both men and women. But there is a division of labor. The men built the walls with small hand-shaped mud bricks, which they plastered. And the woman finished the walls and the flat roofs with a waterproofing clay plaster. And they are the ones who climb onto the roof, pounded the earth with a type of tamping tool while pouring carob juice and sang ritual song. And at this time, they mock the men because the men give them the material, and they are the one who are on the top of the roof. But this division of labor, but that give to women a prominent role, has been quite in difficulty with the influence of colonization, because bricks were replaced by rectangular adobe blocks molded in riverbeds during the dry season. And the practice of festival mutual aid no longer exists and has been replaced by paid professionalized masonry. And also the roof have changed. You have now galvanized roof sheet metals. So as long as you do this, you exclude women from the scene of construction, since the roof also has a different of course, it's a different architecture. So what I wanted to show is that we need to revisit the history of capitalism with another perspective. And this perspective is what Ivan Illich called war against subsistence. This is not a Pacific history course. It's clearly a war. It's a war, but we need to change our vocabulary. Since it's a war, we need to move from a capitalo-centric perspective to a subsistence perspective. So we need to think that it's not subsistence work that, this is subsistence work, that is pre-modern, pre-capitalist or non-capitalist, but capitalism, which is post-subsistence, non-subsistence, and anti-subsistence. We need to change also our way of seeing this evolution. So what is this war against subsistence? The industrial capitalist project relies on households converting to a very, very strange manner. It's very strange to have a cash-based system to satisfy almost all of our basic needs. It's it's very bizarre to say, I need to drink, so I'm going to buy a glass of water. I need to live in a dwelling, so I need to buy some materials, and so on and so on. It's very recent to have this intermediation through money to have what you need. So to achieve this transformation, this big transformation, the local organization of subsistence is replaced by another type of system where you must spend money and therefore engage in activities that generate money in order to satisfy your basic needs. It is a major anthropological change to have to use money almost systematically for everything. So how did it happen? It's not something, it was not natural or spontaneous. The first step consists in replacing domestic groups and by a nuclear family. So I don't know if you're familiar, I will use a word in English that is household, but in French we have another word which is maisonnée, which is a little bit different, but there is no translation. So in English we speak about household, but what I like is household means holding the house. House doesn't mean a family. A house is very different from a family. So household is a very interesting word. And actually, this is a word that anthropologists choose a lot to speak about the pre-modern societies. So what happened? Nuclear family is 2 parents, 2 kids, generally, and maybe 2 pets, and maybe some plants, but domestic plants. But anyway, the nuclear family became a unit of reference, and it happened in the northern countries between the 11th century and the 17th century. Medievalists could researchers could actually show that you had a very big change in weddings. Weddings didn't mean that two households would be combined, but a man and a woman, which makes a big difference. It's a couple that is sanctified by a wedding, but not two different households. And actually what is very, very convenient in a couple, these are only two persons. Households means a lot of other persons, extended large and family. So it's also the households refer to village community, collectively use the lands, and the birth of the couple means, gives birth to the private property. And also, so Silvia Federici, I heard that she was translated in Danish very recently, so she speaks about this evolution, interprets the witch hunts of the 14th to 16th century as an act of terror directed against peasant societies, involving the demonization of women and criminalization of their knowledge. Silvia Federici points out in her demonstration that this demonization of women created actually a war between men and women facing each others. And she also shows that the same phenomenon appeared in Africa in the 20th century, when she saw women fighting against multinationals who that wanted to to grab fertile lands, and these women were accused also of witchcraft. Rural exodus completes the process of destroying households by depriving the countryside of workers and placing the burden of feeding urban dwellers and extracting raw materials on the few of them who remain. So urban migrants gradually lose the habits of helping their relatives who have remained in the village to work in the fields. So the first, as I said, the first step is inventing the couple, heterosexual couple. Second step, because the households were not especially heterosexual. Second step, but I will explain later. Second step, we invent a very bizarre figure. I think you can see here. This is not a universal. It's very recent. It never happened elsewhere. It's typically an industrial figure. This is a housewife. You don't find a housewife in peasant societies. It didn't exist. So the transformation of domestic spaces into private spaces where domestic production is reduced to the preparation of purchased manufactured goods is a fundamental lever. The home is no longer a multifunctional place where living materials are transformed, but a place of consumption with separate places, private, public, professional, political, and it contributes to the confinement of women inside the home. This is what Mariam Maes and Veronica Banold Thompson called housewifization. Suddenly a woman was housewifed. First it started with bourgeois class, because you couldn't, put inside peasant women. They were really required to work at on every part of the farm. So it started with the bourgeois class, and they were busy doing non-messy work, embroidery, decoration, in the 19th century. And so this was the model of the inactive woman. But after they invented a trans-class figure from the bourgeoisie to workers and farmers, the hyperactive housewife. And actually, this is it became a very important thing, so important that a new discipline was invented, which is home economics. And women had to attend this kind of classes. I don't know, maybe you should ask your grandmother if she attended this kind of classes where were taught how to sew, how to cook, so it was, actually, it meant how to be a good female consumer in a consuming society, because it's not natural to buy things. So they needed schools. Actually, in Ellis Island, when you were a migrant, every migrant had home economics classes because they needed to be trained as perfect capitalist new consumer and for the American dream. So it's everything, the home changed, and architects designed these new homes with water, electricity, appliance, cookers, washing machine, vacuum cleaners. And actually it's very interesting because it was not supposed to be common. It could have been put in common, in a special room, because in peasant societies, a lot of things were common. Here, all these facilities were made to be private inside the home. We had some socialist experiments of all these equipments that could be common, but didn't last a lot. What we need to remember is that the ideal is more to be in private home. So actually, we invented the housewife who is alone in her home with all her equipments. The third stage of housewifization consists in reducing the household work to the sphere of emotional and educational care. It's very interesting because the more equipment you have, actually, the less you can work at home as a housewife. So the more you can take care emotionally and give love. So actually, the invention of a loving family, a loving wife, also arises with this, it's actually an invention. Women are expected to provide care, to supervise the children's schooling, and allow the breadwinner, her husband, to rest. Historians of the pre-modern era actually are very cautious about the independence and emancipation through this evolution. Anyway, ecofeminists, of course, noticed that what happens is that care became detached from subsistence work. I don't know if you see the difference. It doesn't mean that before these societies were not careful. It means that care doesn't go through the act of giving you food from the garden or sewing something with the sheep that you grew, and So care is very abstracted, is only emotional. It doesn't go through this material care. And actually, what happened is that the environmental care also was destroyed through this evolution. Since caring somebody doesn't mean caring for water, caring for forest, caring for the soil, which was, of course, what was very important in peasant societies. Anyway, this new organization requires a lot of private investment, So we need the ferry of electricity to bring the ideal type of the fairy at home, this woman. Alongside these three stages, subsistence feminists highlight another major step in this great transformation. It's colonization. Colonization, because for global North to enjoy modern comforts by pursuing careers, getting paid job, increasing consumerism, having electricity. It means that we can provide low-cost products and services. So colonization makes possible the idea that we enslave population and organize also free forced labor on plantation so that actually we can afford this modern dream. So Mariamis and Veronica Benold-Thompson studied the consequences of industrialization in India from the 70s to the 90s, and she actually could see a rise in violence against women, because actually women were not considered were considered as doing a non-interesting work, because this kind of housework is not were not very qualified and didn't require as many craft as the other subsistence work required. So domestic work became very devalued in the consumption society. Other destructive factors are accelerating the dismantling of subsistence organization. Vernacular knowledge is stigmatized and viewed as backward. Biodiverse biotopes are reduced to monoculture. Living environments are segmented by private property, crisscrossed by roads, and the urban sprawl. The distances between supply location and consuming sites are increasing. And so this is really, and also we have in the literal sense a lot of bombs that literally destroy the crops. So for Mariamis and Veronica Benold-Thompson, the term war against subsistence has to be taken on a very literal meaning. The global war on subsistence is not only physical, it's also in the memory. By destroying and reshaping biotopes, the knowledge of what material can be harvested, at what time, in what quantity, how it can be regenerated, how is it available, this all knowledge coming through the fact you walk in a landscape, this knowledge is lost. So this kind of skill is exercised in situation, is very local. So when you destroy this local landscape, you destroy also the memory. So I would like now maybe to try to summarize conceptually speaking two different concepts, so that now I had like this historical framework, but now I would like to speak about the difference between subsistence work and domestic work, because sometimes we can make the confusion. It's, I think, this pyramid that Mariamis and Veronica Benold-Thompson created is really, really striking and actually rejoicing. Why is it rejoicing? Don't you feel happy when you see it? I feel very happy, because on the top, which is the visible economy, is a smaller part. The visible part, you know, the top is very tiny compared to what you find beneath, which is home worker, subsistence peasants, housework women, the global south, and nature. So it means that you don't have, capitalism doesn't work if you don't have all these activities supporting capitalism. So we need to make a difference, a very important difference between actually subsistence activities and reproductive activities, because we have this feminist framework which distinguishes productive and reproductive. I don't know if this is the same in Danish, if you do have them. But the problem is that when you have this dual opposition between productive and reproductive, so reproductive is underneath, you know, and the productive is at the top. You think that everything underneath is equal, is the same. But it's not exactly this. Because subsistence work makes it possible to satisfy food needs or building needs or dwelling needs through work in kind. and you don't need, and you can also have small monetary gain from the sale of the surplus, but your activity is not oriented by selling. In domestic work, consumption work is major. It means you need to buy everything. Consumption work is not specially concerned by the birth of plants or animals. In domestic work, you don't create your own tools. You don't specially prepare the soil. And actually, you don't tell your children that they need to work to do it with you. The consumer and domestic work actually relies on a very small community. It's the family, especially women, sometimes the girls and not the boys, and sometimes the grandmothers, and sometimes men. But it's very different in subsistence work, which requires a very big community to handle all the basic needs. So I need to make another conceptual clarification. I will conclude first. So domestic work for ecofeminist based on subsistence. Domestic work is poor, alienating, a shadow work because it's underappreciated, underpaid, but also underqualified compared to subsistence work. So they don't think it's a burden because it's not paid. They think it's a burden because it's not a creative work. It's too poor compared to subsistence work, where you can create living matters and also your own tools and being in relationship with a very, very different kind of community. So now I would like to clarify more, to give you also some definition of what is a subsistence household. So as I said, a household is not a family. A subsistence household may unite people who are related, of course, but it's not a kinship organization. It's more than a family. It's more about people living under the same roof. And also, it's not only one roof, it's connected to other households. The other thing is that this subsistence household is not only concerned and with humans. You don't only find human beings, you also find non-humans, animals and plants. The household is very multi-specific composed with a lot of domestic and plants, tools, building, spirits. So in a household, you have at the same time human beings and also non-human beings. And what do they do together, these human beings and animals and plants? They all have to work. They have to work collectively, they have to dedicate a part of their time to the common good, and they live together in the same place, sharing the same work. Everyone has to do something, regardless of age, gender, species, or physical condition. Of course, there are adaptations, but everybody has to do a part of the job. So it doesn't mean that everybody is doing the same thing, but nobody is not doing anything. And also it's a working unit. In other words, you cannot understand a household if you don't think about the fact that this is a task-oriented association. Another important thing is that this kind of household don't have the same level of specialization. So now we have you are very specialized. You are architects, you are engineers, you are agriculture, you are masons. In a household, a lot of people can do a lot of different things. They can actually, and it's a crucial. You have division of labor, you have specialized people, but everybody is aware and knows by the eyes, by touching, by learning passively sometimes what the others do. So they can replace each other at some point. It's very important because when you have like a big harvest, you need everybody to do it. When you have a house in clay, when it's drying, you need everybody to polish the clay. You can't say, no, I'm a woman, I'm an old woman, I'm a chief, or, you have to do it. Everybody. So because the kind of living matters you deal with require all the task force, which is not the case actually in industrialized society, which is very, very based on a very strict division of labor and big specialties. And another very interesting and important thing in households is that the tasks are related to seasons. Here, I forget actually, I'm in winter. I'm sweating in my, it's too hot. We can't forget about seasons. It's impossible in this kind of households because actually living matters have seasons and you have to follow them. So it means the architecture is totally different. In these households, you actually need gardens, you need attics, you need cellars, you need garage, you need guest rooms, you need storage areas. Actually, the storage areas are the most important part of the house because you need everything to be in a good shape for the next season. So it means that everybody cares about storage. So doing, housework means having a very crucial task. In other words, this kind of household is a unit of organization and distribution of vital labor, resources, and also an organization to redistribute the fruits of labor. Because it's not a small activity. It's very crucial that resources can reach the right people at the right time in the right place, and you need to balance, to proportion, to redistribute with a lot of caution. So when we speak about household, it means that it's an art of distribution. Actually, these are other sketches. This is the one because I prefer something less pyramidal that I created to say the same thing, actually, but more into like a new materialist approach where you have everything being in relation with everything, because this one, this figuration was too mathematical for me. Anyway, so living in a household means that you need to listen, to touch, to the polyrhythm of the world, and to be with your skin, with your ears, with all your senses. You need to be alert, to explore, and to be in this vibrant world. And so it's very interesting because loving means something very different. You don't love a person. You love a place. And two people love the place. So it's a topologic organization. It means that you love each other for loving the common goods in the households for everybody. So it means that renewing the living matters, renewing the place, the gardens, the fields, is a common goal that will put people together and love each other. So it's a very different ways of loving, actually, or caring, because making a sustainable household for everybody is actually the reason why people care for each other. It's very strange to love each other without loving a space or a biotop, or, you know, it's very strange for me now that I have this subsistence perspective. Anyway, it's very recent. So let's not be romantic about household. You can have this organization in slavery, okay? It's not, by definition, egalitarian. It can be very patriarchal. It can also survive in authoritarian regimes. So it's not by itself a good organization. This is not what I wanted to mean. But what also the historian could observe is that in this kind of organization, you could also find egalitarian attempts to have a good distribution of tasks. And also you have another definition of what political scene means. Domestic scenes is conflicts, debates are political inside these households, because it means will I have the good burden, the good charge of work, or will it be too much? And it's going to be exploitation. So the exploitation problem is every day a conflict in households. So there are disputes, a lot of disputes about the boundaries, land right issues, land rights of water. The equality in this kind of community of subsistence is not a given. It requires constantly reopening cases and also a lot of arguing. But the difference between our democracy and this kind of household democracy is that this domestic parliament is not abstracted. You discussed in front of the problem, not on a paper or behind a screen, but on the ground with experience in hand. I think this is what you face when you're, I saw all your installation as an architect, and when you have a dispute, it's because you have the wood in the hand, and you can say, no, this is this way, no, it's not, and you can see. So this is exactly what you experience when you do manual work. So I don't mean that this kind of organization is impartial or is a guarantee of democracy, but at least when you argue, you touch the material, which is really, really important. So now, I don't know if I have a lot of time, but I would like to tell you about subsistence right now. And this is I don't know how many, I should stop. 5 minutes. Okay, so let's do this. This is what? Okay. I worked on this little blue dot. Okay, this is a yurt. There is a yurt there. And I studied, as I told you, I studied to a baker and a peasant couple actually working together, and they have this kind of household that I described. But I wanted to answer a very crucial question for today. Is it economically viable? Do they live? How do they manage? Because they live in a post-subsistence world. We never. It's over. We don't. The subsistence work is the past, or is another country than in Europe. So how do they manage to reinvent subsistence while they are surrounded by consumption and industrial production? So I wanted to count everything they had, and also to evaluate every time, every minute, how long does it take to have 2 cows? How much it costs to live in a yurt you build yourself? And how, so I tried to count. And it's really important to not to give numbers or to leave numbers to capitalist societies. We can also produce our own counting, which is quite different. So actually, Henri Thoreau, Walden of Life in the Wood, counted in his own book and gave the counts of the, I don't know if you, I think you know this book, but you know, he made a lot of counts, how much he spent it for the and actually home economics does the same thing. They count a lot. So I said, okay, I'm going to count also. And I made a whole book telling the story of 2 people, 2 cows, bees, and goats and chicken, and try to count everything. But as I won't have time to speak about these schedules, but my counting is a little bit different because you see, I have more words than numbers. Because for me, the important thing is to also describe. For yurt, for example, I need to describe every stages. And what I do is I not only count money, I count how many days it takes. So if you know, and I don't only count what they do, I count what they could do if they had more money. So I have the last, if they had to, if they could purchase a real house, it would cost 104,000, you know. So I always compare what they really do and what also they could do if they would live in a regular consumption society. So actually, for living, it costs them 950 euros, which is quite nothing for living. So I translated in English, but I have 60 of them, so I'm not going to show you. But I also wanted to see what does it cost when you have a solar. So I won't have time to develop this kind of methodology, but I wanted to say that maybe as an architect, this is something that you could reuse, because it also gives you not only numbers or how much it costs, but also what people think if it's worth it or not. Because actually the idea of this kind of counting is not to say that a euro is a euro or a kilometer is a kilometer. You have 5 kilometers, that is a big distance, and sometimes it's a short distance. It depends. And this is the same for a euro. So I always put the euros and how do they think? Is it costly? Is it worth it? So it's a very this methodology tries also not to disconnect counting and evaluating on everyday life. So what I wanted to, so I did this for everything possible. And maybe to finish, I would like to show you, I tried to make I couldn't translate this, but this is what Florian and Myriam do on an everyday life basis in a year. And you have everything they have in their mind. They have to think about all these living matters, you know, that surround them, and everything they transform. And so you see that they have when we say they have a simple life, it's quite a complex life. It's very, very complex. They have a lot of things to think about. And it's a very rich life also. But I wanted to count the minutes, the money, and the in-kind and the non-money operation. They had to combine because they live in a post-subsistence work, so they have to have a car, but at the same time a computer, and at the same time they have a garden that supply their own food. So they have in both worlds. So it's a big, they call themselves very speed. They are always running, actually. They are not quite... So to make a conclusion, I would say that citizenship has been decoupled or detached from the right to subsistence. The skills for subsistence farming and building using natural resources is no longer part of basic education, even if I heard that in this school you had also a lot of skill that you developed. So I'm very happy to hear that this is a specificity of your school. The question of sharing labor involved in transforming raw materials into a material that you can use has been totally removed from the egalitarian horizon of our democracy. So we change our ideal. Now the promise of social mobility is the promise of highly educated to escape from especially subsistence work. For me now, the impossibility of accessing a minimal territory for communal subsistence constitutes a major inequality in terms of both material and political autonomy. So not having access to a subsistence land, subsistence craft is an important discrimination and a form of domination that we need to examine in an intersectional perspective, because we speak about gender, class, race, division. But for me, and for subsistence ecofeminism, access to a territory and subsistence skills is also a major problem when we want to face climate change.
Thank you very much for the talk. I guess. Are you okay? Do you need a minute to go to the toilet, or you're good? I think this is fine. Can you hear me well? Thank you for a super interesting and very rich talk. It's challenging to ask you a meaningful question after a lot of things you've said, because I think you put a lot of very nice thoughts into our minds. I am originally from Argentina, so a lot of the things that you were saying resonated a lot with me, especially it made me think of my grandmother, that I always admire her because neither spiders or bees will bite her. She was very skilled with touching them because she spent a lot of time doing things all the time in the house. And maybe I have two questions for you, and maybe then we can open up to the audience, because I'm sure there's questions for you. The first question is a personal one, and I wanted to ask you in which type of household do you live?
I live in a tiny household since I don't live in a community. I wish I could, but I have a companion. But I live, so we are two human beings with kids, but thousands of plants, and we grow our own food and also a lot of medicinal plants, and it takes at least a third of my schedule. So it means that I don't have other leisures outside this. But for me, it's very important to have this, because I couldn't write about subsistence work if I was not also trying, testing, because it's something that really, emotionally speaking, it puts you in such a very state that you cannot remain behind your computer and saying, oh, I'm going to write on something that actually, if you just don't read the book, it's better. I mean, because the goal of the book is for you to do things and not to read more. So it's I'm quite in a contradiction. So I try to intertwine all this, but it's on a very small scale. I work on very radical communities that have very. So I'm quite because I have too many things to discover with plants that I ignored for 40 years. I'm 52, so that I really need to concentrate on that right now in my life. And building also with clay, it's it's also a big part of. It takes a lot of time for me too.
The second question is maybe a bit less romantic and maybe more difficult to, I think, to articulate, but I will try to do it. I think what you said towards the end of the lecture is really relevant to remind ourselves that we are living in a post-subsistence society. So sometimes I was conflicted in your talk because on one hand you only talk to peasants and you talk to people that have access to land, and you talk to people that have perhaps very ideal situations of subsistence and very well thriving communities because they found a place to do it. They've been able to develop in that way, and they've had the chance to get there. I was very glad that when you talked about household, you also mentioned slavery, because I think there's a lot of similar structures that could be overlap. It also reminds me of Charles Fourier and the whole development of the Familistère and this kind of perfect society that was built right next to industry to support exactly a perfect household. And it was ideal and it was well intended, so it works, but we can also see the pitfalls of that. And one of the works that I studied a lot as an architecture student during my PhD was the work of Ivan Illich. And we read a lot, Tools for Conviviality, Shadow Work, The School in Society. And Tools for Conviviality, I think, was a book that was very illuminating for me, because it was, as you also mentioned now, like you said, like you have an ignorance toward plants, so you have to spend time teaching yourself, getting access to knowledge. And in a way, Tools for Conviviality was this book that somehow says or opens up this idea that conviviality is the capacity of any organism group to know the tools that allow them to subsist or exist. So really it's an epistemological issue. There's an issue of knowledge here. It's not really about work in the garden. I get a bit itchy when we think of that gardens and working with clay will solve all of our problems in a post-subsistence society, because the reality is like not many people have access to that. Not many people have access to a non-polluted garden. So it's great that you guys are doing this project in Copenhagen with gardens, but who has access to these fantastic gardens that you have? I think it's very critical to see many urban situations where this is not so easy to make it operational. So one of the things, for example, that I see a lot in Argentina and Buenos Aires is that there's a lot of ecologists of post-subsistence knowledge. So no gardening, no building with clay, but basically alliances or ways of creating societies or collaborations that hack, intervene, or somehow interrupt the flows that dominate capitalist linear functioning. Is polluted with it, but is also trying to resist it. So I was wondering if in your work are you interested also in looking at the less ideal subsistence communities, the ones that are messy, they're urban, they're corrupted, they have violence, and what can you say about this? Not just the capability to touch unpolluted clay or grow really tasty tomatoes, but also touch things that are maybe more difficult to touch, bodies that are a bit more ill, and still we need to touch them just like doctors do. And if you could maybe expand on maybe other forms of mapping these other groups or organisms of knowledge, which I think I like to think of Illich, because he really talked about knowledge, not necessarily a particular craft or a garden, but there was really an issue. How do we battle agnotology, which is the condition of being ignorant? How do we train ourselves into this other world of getting to know things in different ways?
Yeah, Thank you for the question, because this is why I ended by saying that it's a major discrimination, inequality, is access to a land, I would say a non-polluted land. But I forget about this because every land is polluted. So I don't, it's not, there is no such place existing right now. So for me, in putting this framework makes you also, gives you the opportunity also to see other radical groups that need to work where industrially is, and to, as you said, interrupt the machines and to put another knowledge. But for me, I really, really think that we should have, I don't know, we call them bulldozers, I don't know. You know, these machines that destroy bulldozers, you know. We need to go to manifestations with bulldozers, because we need to destroy the roads so that we can see the soil. Because we have a lot of ground in cities, it's just recovered by something that allows you to go very fast on it, even to ride a bicycle. But meanwhile, you just don't see the soil. So we can't say that cities don't have access to land, but the land is made for cars or for a certain way of living. But this is very, very difficult. So for me, architects have, or urbanists have a major role in trying to putting the soil open and giving more space in new cities, because it's only 50 years. It's nothing, because anyway, it's going to be recovered by the earth. I have no doubt. I mean, it will be recovered anyway. So let's accelerate this fate, which is actually the only one we can predict. That the only thing we should actually be very, very cautious about, and we should keep concrete, is for nuclear plants, because we'll need all the concrete of the world to take care of the nuclear plants that will, you know, because we know that concrete will dissolve, which is not a very permanent. So for me, it's important that all these groups, I because I'm invited in a lot of urban spaces, are very radical, and what is very interesting is that they all try to have access to an urban garden, even if they don't. So for me, it's a sign that. And the other thing which is not very optimistic is that I see a lot of activists at some point being so tired, being exhausted, because they are in the heart of the machinery, and they go to the countryside. So we have like this, you know, yeah. So it's a very like you are young, you live in the city, and at some point you just. Capitalism is so strong that you want to leave aside. So knowledge is very important. And for me, I worked about chantier participatif. I don't know how to translate this. Collective building work. And it can, and in this kind of action, the more important is to create a collective. Because as I said, it doesn't mean subsistence is nothing without creating the condition of equality. So a feminist, anti-patriarchal, and so you need to be trained for that. And you can be trained, in all these groups, they are very, very cautious about who speak, who never speaks, how can you be sure that everybody has his opinion represented. And for me, this is crucial, because subsistence work in itself is not egalitarian. So, yeah, this is community organizing, exactly.
Yeah. That's very nice. Are there any questions, Joe?
Hi, thanks for sharing. I think we should bring the microphone.
Joe has a strong voice.
Hi, thanks for sharing. I had a thought as you were speaking, and I wondered how you'd respond to it.
there's this critique of ecofeminism, especially within queer and crip theory, and I'm wondering whether the way that you're presenting a body is in somehow essentializing a body as its ability to work, or its ability for labor, its ability to touch earth. Is this an ableist proposition? And how can, and you also define a household by its ability to work. So is this a problem? And especially not only because, let's say, of the ableist tendency, but also in the sense that if I'm trying to convince someone of something, isn't there also a capacity for pleasure that you want to also communicate, which might be outside of the ability to work?
I don't know if it's working. Okay. No, thank you for the questions, because I had to do this a lot. I mean, on the reverse, you have a lot, you can do a lot of things for the group without walking, for example, just sitting on a chair and taking care of a lot of things. And when you experience life with old people, you can see the importance they have in a household, for example, without being valid. So for me, it's the reverse. We live. No. Yeah, tell me.
But that's still labor.
Yeah. I insist. Yeah, I insist on labor because because everybody would think that it's natural or spontaneous.
Natural for some bodies.
It's not?
It's not natural or capable for some bodies. There's some bodies that can't do that.
So, I don't.
Diminish their
I don't mean. What do you mean doing? Give me a special activity.
No, I mean there are some bodies that are not capable of the labor you're proposing.
I think that
It is intellectual labor.
No, I think that everybody, because I did this collective work, for example, with people, I mean, with no legs, having in a wheelchair, and doing a lot of things. So I don't think, I think this is a reverse. I think that everybody, and it can be not actually working with your body. It can be talking, it can be caring, it can be thinking or something. So for me, this is a whole, you see what I mean, or you disagree?
I disagree because there are people, let's say, with intellectual disabilities who would not be able to do the thing you're proposing. As well as physical labor, there is mental labor. But a person's value is not in their capacity for labor. The person's value is probably somewhere else.
Yeah, okay, but it doesn't mean, because you are telling me that in this kind of households, in peasant societies, they would put aside disability people, and it's not the case. We have a lot of proofs of disability, mental illness that were really well treated in this kind of communities. So this is why, for me, historically and sociologically speaking, it's quite bizarre. It's as if we invented taking care of crip people. No?
That's the point. At some point, whether it's the stage when a child is in the initial phases of life, or the last 5 years of my life, I will be enabled to do the things. And the community does care for these people outside of their capacity for labor. And should that not be a way of presenting your, let's say, model of community rather than a household as a laboring unit is as a caring unit, let's say?
It's a caring labor. Okay, thank you for the... I should insist on the fact that this is a caring unit. But when I say caring, sometimes people forget about the labor behind it. So this is for me a choice, and I should, you're right, insist also on something that is also more festive, I don't know the word, because there is a lot of joyful, leisure. But actually, the boundaries between leisures and labor is quite thin. So this is also the problem. So it's true that for me to be understood and not people to think this is like an ideal life where you just to show it's also a hard life. I don't say it's a beautiful and funny life, but I should also say that pleasure. It's a pleasure, actually. It's a pleasure also. And I could actually, since it was very hard for me to describe, I wrote 9 days, minute per minute, of this baker and peasant couple to show exactly the intertwining between leisure, meeting friends, they stop doing something, they chat, they eat something, they see an animal, they play with their daughters, and you see it's totally intertwined. And maybe, and you're totally right, sorry, it took me a while to understand where you wanted to go, because usually, since I'm a sociologist of work, so I wanted also to not to have an idealization of this kind of life, which meaning this is you spend your life working a lot in capitalist society, and in this new household, you work a lot too, but the boundaries are very different, and this is. Yeah, I hope you see what I mean. And about the queer, I wanted also to speak about, because I couldn't develop as much as I can, but what is really interesting in this community organization is that it's, since it's not the couple in the middle of the core, actually, so a man and a woman, it means you could have a lot of women who never have babies, a lot of men who would never marry, and it meant a lot of. It can mean a more community organization, which is not based on reproduction, because human reproduction, because the reproduction of plants, of animals, of tools that you have to repair were as more, the same importance. So it means that you don't have women taking care of the kids, but the whole community taking care of everything, everybody, every human, non-human matter or beings that is too small, actually, to be autonomous. So for me, it's a very interesting, it can destroy also, we have a lot of queer communities actually living this way. So I have a lot of researches I made about that, There's
another question here.
Thanks a lot for all your thoughts. I have a very specific curiosity. At the beginning, you were mentioning, you were trying to push this idea of subsistence from basic needs, from individual survival to, you call it a collective coordination of society, and this word coordination is something that we work a lot with, and it's always a bit a struggle to try to map coordination, to try to imagine coordinations, and at the end it is very interesting how you start to visualize. I think this couple that you described at the beginning in this diagram with arrows. And in the legend, there is a simple relation that is written. And I wanted to ask, how do you define that and what does it mean? There was a simple relation and a reciprocal relation. So reciprocal relation, it calls me more an idea of mutualism, I guess, but it was a curiosity how the simple relation was thought.
I should have maybe, because the simple relation was when they sell something, when they make bread and they, this is Yeah, here, this is when you have it means that they sell and they have money from it. So, and you see that this is a very black one, and they don't sell that much. You see, this is not, their major life is not based on selling things. They sell eggs and bread and a little bit of also a chicken, but the major is coming and they transform inside. But I couldn't. It was quite complex for me to find a way to draw. Actually, I was helped by a graphist because there were too many arrows, and also I had to simplify everything. This is a problem. So this is why, for me, the schedules are really more complex. And actually, since I was not sure I would be understood, I wrote a very, very long narrative. The half of the book is only 9 days. And I tell the story. Because I said, okay, give me the biggest book possible on only 5 hectares, 2 people, 9 days. So this is, trying to say everything possible happening. So the sketchers are trying, but for me the best part is the narrative, because it's you have the whole complexity. But yeah, the interesting, the problematic thing for me was to qualify. How do I qualify thing? Because you have a lot of economic words, and I went and to see economic, and they couldn't qualify what I was trying to sketch. So I had to invent. I said, okay, you buy the first time a renewal matter, for example, a cow, but you don't need to buy another cow because you will have a calf. So the cow that you bought for the first time, you don't need to buy it a second time because you have a calf. So it is also this that I try, because they don't inherit it. They have to buy at first because they don't have family with everything. So they are really like you and me. Maybe you have a cow at your home and I don't know it. But but they really had to buy it the first time. So I really wanted to show how to live in a post-subsistence society and how you recreate something, and you don't have lands from your parents. So how you grab, you buy, you start, And it's after 8 years that they could combine all these things.
Are there any other questions? If not, Antonio, can you hold this? Because if not, and then Nicola is asking us to wrap up.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. I was highly intrigued by the argument of counting and then sort of quantification of this subsistence model in terms, of course, I guess there's to me a question of whether counting it in monetary terms, of course, makes the game of the capitalist system, but nevertheless, I think the last column that you hinted at, the one that somehow not only quantifies non-material relationships, so like labor, but also projects a sort of speculative quantification of the value that would have in its reciprocal or like analogous element in the capitalist system, no? And I think that's very, very intriguing, because it somehow then quantifies what is the power or the value that has in the capitalist system, no? And I'm intrigued by kind of what method you use, but more than that, like sort of whether you see it as a tool to kind of empower the voice, in the sense of like making clear what would be their value, the actual value.
Yeah, my problem is to be understood in a capitalist world. So I needed to make sure that, so I needed to use every tools possible to make, to be, and counting is also, yeah, maybe we should.
I was intrigued by the fact that one became 140,000 euros. Like the labor is 1,000, but then its reciprocal value is 140,000.
Here, this is this one, yeah. So what if they paid? What is intriguing? So
I mean, the fact that sort of the speculative values that are connected to it are much also larger than the material values, and that if we could somehow demonstrate that in a very solid way, which is what we're trying to do, then
for me. Oh yeah, when people tell me living differently costs an arm and a leg, and I say, oh, really, did you count? Because it doesn't cost at all. And I really try to do it on every activity, to have a cow, to have chicken, to buy lands, how much it costs, when, you know, it's really incredible, because they had to work to have cash money, you know, and actually they can still have a new tractor, but a very small one they can repair themselves, so it costs less and really not the same price as a modern tractor. So what it costs is knowledge. You need to know how to repair an old agricultural machine. So I try to show that it doesn't cost that much, but it costs some time, it costs knowledge, and also it costs a lot of time in socialization, because they wouldn't be able to do this if they were not living. This is living with all these persons around. So this is also what I tried to calculate. How many people do they know? You know, just how many people do they need for helping? Because they can't do it by themselves. They need people for helping. So I show that they also used institutions, you know, state, national, public institution, but also a lot of friends. So for me, I'm not sure I am answering your questions, but it's also trying to say that to give actually some tools for people who want to live differently, and to for them to understand a little bit, because this is a very small case, a particular case, but it would give them an idea of what they would save, or what it would cost, how much time it requires, what kind of organization. And for example, for me, the major obstacle for people who want to live differently is when you don't like chatting, okay? Because when you don't spend money a lot, and you exchange a lot of things, it means you have to chat a lot. And when you, so, you know, speaking abilities are just very, very important in this kind of communities. So in terms, so it's very, so this is, I wanted to give some tools, but not tools I invented, tools I found in the field work, because I also knew that this kind of a way of life will never be found in archives, because they don't exist for the government. You know, they live irregularly in a land where they shouldn't have a yacht. So they are totally invisible. So I wanted also to make visible some people who live illegally, but are very recognized by, they are not, they don't have that many problems. But so for me, it was also a question of telling the story of people who won't have stories anyway.
Thank you very much. Let's give a big round to...
Thank you very much. To calculate or not to calculate, or what has been calculated and what has not, might be the question. Of course, it's paradoxical to say that time's up right now. But we will see each other again on the 8th of May for Partner Rose here. Once again, thank you so much for a most intriguing talk, Geneviève. Thank you so much, Anne-Sophie, for the introduction, and not least also to you, Caroline, for your great moderation. And yeah, see you soon. Thank you very much.